Mutant X Storm. Mutant X Storm is a mutant vampire. She goes by the name Bloodstorm. Classic. After being captured by Dracula, who wanted her as one of his brides, Storm is turned into a vampire. She gets her revenge though, aiding the X-Men in defeating Dracula, although she felt it was only right for her to leave the team now that she was infected with vampirism. Vampirism? Vampirism. And you know, bloodlust and what have you. Kinda would be problematic if you're trying to work on a team and you just keep trying to bite your peers. Imagine that wouldn't go over well. Later on, she would cross paths with Gambit, who pleaded with her to turn him into a vampire. So she agreed and she sired him, something that he would later resent her for in the long run. Moving on to number 9, Dark Claw. Dark Claw is the amalgamation of Batman and Wolverine from the Amalgam Universe. So why is he scary and not just like totally freaking awesome? Well, just look at him. Debuting back in 1966, this character was a meta-mutant detective whose origin story is a combination between the two iconic characters' own beginnings. Logan Wayne witnessed his parents' murders as a child. When he grew up, he would join the Air Force and eventually was transferred to the Weapon X program. This is where he gains his Wolverine abilities, his adamantium-laced skeleton, and a supercharged increase in strength. Deemed a failure by those conducting the Weapon X program, he ended up going back home to New Gotham City and became Dark Claw, roaming the streets as a vigilante fighting crime. And at number 8, Storm Phoenix. Coming at you from What If Volume 2 Issue 79, this alternate version of Storm is a version that had the power of the Phoenix rather than Jean Grey. The Phoenix Force possesses her after a mission in space with the X-Men. When she comes back to Earth, she ends up creating a worldwide organization to protect the environment. Seems noble, right? But you know, she takes it a little too far. Instead of it just being a regular altruistic organization, Storm openly harms those opposed to her ideals, suspending them in animation up in the Earth's atmosphere, which you gotta admit is actually kind of a funny way to, you know, be like, you to somebody. Suspend you up in the air. She ends up freezing an entire community after they violate an anti-hunting agreement. Eventually Storm Phoenix is defeated thanks to Kitty Pryde phasing into her original body. But all in all, things could have escalated to much darker territory if she hadn't been stopped when she was. Moving on to number 7, the Red Queen. This alternate version of Jean Grey hails from Earth 9575. An alternate reality that's first seen in X-Men issue 5 from 1995. This Jean has been depowered thanks to previous crimes she's committed, and it's a little unclear as to whether or not she had access to the Phoenix Force in the past. Now, having been banished from her own Earth, Earth 998, she decides to reinvent herself by pretending to be a reincarnated version of Queen Madeline Pryor, her clone. From here, she embarks on a quest to become the Queen of Britain and eventually conquer the rest of the planet. And she had a plan to do it and restore her powers by finding various different iterations of Nate Grey from across the multiverse. She would essentially lure them onto her Earth, use them, drain them of their abilities until they died, and then, you know, just grab another one and use him. Eventually, she tries this trick on the 616 Nate Grey, who ends up breaking free from her powers, which results in her draining all of the life force of the other Nate Greys in an attempt to defeat the 616 Nate. But eventually, Nate creates a sun around her and burns her alive. And fun fact, later on in the 616 continuity, Madeline Pryor would actually begin using the alias of Red Queen. Funny enough. She's like, I'm inspired. Moving on to number 6, Age of Apocalypse Colossus. Colossus of Earth 295 from the Age of Apocalypse Earth is not only frightening, but absolutely tragic. During the Age of Apocalypse event, he was forced out of retirement for a second time. The first was after he was so severely injured that he couldn't transform back into his human form, and was only kept together by Magneto's metal manipulation. The second time though that he came out of retirement was thanks to him needing to go on a very important mission to combat Apocalypse for Magneto. He and his wife Shadowcat led a team of mutants to save Colossus' sister, Ileana, who was the only mutant left alive with reality-traveling powers. In the process of rescuing her, he and Shadowcat abandoned their team, leaving them for dead. When he later learned that the reality that Magneto was trying to save with her powers and his plan was one in which Ileana was dead, he went berserk, going on a rampage that caused the deaths of several mutants, including his own wife. He was eventually killed by Gambit as a last resort in trying to control the mutant. And at number 5, Brute from Mutant X. Beast has had a handful of scary alternate versions, but this one looks like he crawled right out of a creature feature. Here we have Hank McCoy of Earth 1298, the Mutant X Earth, who is known as Brute rather than Beast. Brute came to be thanks to a series of deadly experiments that he conducted on himself, that not only changed him into this aquatic-esque being, which allowed him to breathe underwater, but also reduced his intelligence down to the level of a child in kindergarten. He is later further mutated, gaining hooves for feet. While he may not have his smarts anymore, the character does have a berserker streak, which, when unleashed, can be fatal for anyone in his way, especially considering his mental temperament. He's a bit of a tragic character as well. He was falsely accused of the murders of Green Goblin and Ben Reilly, and was executed for it. And at number 4, New Sun Gambit. From Earth 9921, we have this insanely powerful and terrifying version of Gambit known as New Sun. New Sun has control of kinetic energy on a molecular level. This means he can turn any object's potential energy into kinetic energy, which in turn makes it explosive. And it's a power without much limitations. He doesn't need to make physical contact with an object to do so, and can even do it to living beings, including humans. His total kinetic control can also stop motion, and he can simulate other kinds of energy with it, manipulating whatever kinetic energy is present in order to simulate energies like infrared energy, all by molecular agitation. In addition to that, dude can transform himself into an energy wave, which allows him to travel through space and into other dimensions. Plus, he's also killed his reality's Phoenix, which is no easy feat. He dies in Gambit Volume 3, Issue 23 when he's impaled and then explodes, which also causes his world to explode in the process. And at number 3, X-Men Forever Storm. The X-Men Forever Storm is also known as Perfect Storm and resides on Earth 161. She's a clone of the original Storm who was created in order to restore the powers of heroes who are trapped on Genosha. But the clone became unstable, rapidly aged, and during an incident with the Shadow King absorbed the darker, less friendly aspects of his personality, to say the least. She ended up becoming malevolent and ambushed the X-Men team during a mission. She would then kill Wolverine and betray the team entirely, fleeing to Wakanda to seek out T'Challa's protection. T'Challa, who had previously been in a relationship with the regular Storm, believed that she was good and saw that she was making an effort to help the people of Wakanda, changing the weather, helping the innocent, you name it. But eventually, after the two got married, Storm betrayed him too, letting Killmonger into their quarters, who killed the rest of the royal family and T'Challa, all so she could rule Wakanda. Moving on to number 2, the Age of X Cyclops. This Cyclops hails from Earth 11326, an Earth in which anti-mutant propaganda is on the rise, and anti-mutant protests eventually lead to the decimation of mutants by the US government. As you can imagine, Cyclops did not fare well in this socio-political climate. Scott operated under the name Basilisk, and after being captured by the government, his eyelids were removed in order to prevent him from having any sort of control over his optic blasts. He was then forced to wear a mask by the prison he was kept in, and was used by Alcatraz as a mutant executioner. Kinda dark. He eventually managed to escape and managed to save some of the other mutants in the process too, but he's forever haunted by the guilt of what he was forced to do, and the lives of innocent mutants that he ended. And finally, in at number 1, the Ruins Charles Xavier. I feel like anytime Professor X has an alternate that's evil, that particular Earth suffers big time because of it. This version of Charles Xavier comes from 1995's Ruins, one of the most depressing and dark alternate reality stories in the Marvel multiverse. Taking place on Earth 9591, this Charles was elected president of the US rather than creating the X-Men. He ends up becoming corrupted and set out on a political crusade against mutants, despite having Warren Worthington III as one of his security staff, although Warren kept his mutations a secret in general. Xavier creates a prison in Texas for mutants, in which mutants are deformed, experimented on, or tortured as a means of controlling their mutations, something that he states is done for their own good. Yeah, super dark. And at number 10, Angel of Earth 311. This version of Angel, known as Werner, appears on Earth 311, the Marvel 1602 universe in which all of the Marvel characters exist in the year 1602. Mutants are referred to as witch breed, and the Catholic Church considers them to be devil worshippers, hunting them down. Generally, if a witch breed could pass as a human, the Inquisitor Enrique, the alternate of Magneto on this Earth, would let them survive, with the intention of having them join his Brotherhood of those who will inherit the Earth. That is actually the name of his brotherhood. Werner had special garments that his mother had made him that hid his wings, but eventually he was found out and fled. The Inquisition, though, threatened that if he did not return, they would kill his mother. So he obeyed, yet they killed her anyway. He was tied up in chains, set to be burned at the stake. That's where the frightful part of his story ends, luckily, with him eventually being rescued and saved from death by the equivalents of Jean Grey, Cyclops, and Iceman. Speaking of Cyclops, though, in at number 9, Cyclops of Earth 200524. This version of Cyclops is gross rather than scary. Hailing from Earth 200524 from the comics, this Cyclops has an eye infection, and the results ain't pretty to say the least. That's pretty much his whole shtick. The comics are parody comics. Like what, but like what? They're parody comics, written in a similar vein as the What If stories, except with a much more comedic spin. Earth 200524 appears in the very first issue of Volume 1 of What, and features the likes of stories titled What If the Avengers All Had Beards? What if DC let us do Batman Daredevil as a crossover? And what if Black Panther were actually white? fight. Yeah, I think you guys probably get the vibe of what they were going for. Moving on to number 8, Robert Drake of Earth 51518. This version of Bobby Iceman Drake comes from the remnants of the Age of Apocalypse reality, remnants which were salvaged by God Emperor Doom and made into a part of his battle world. It's referred to as the domain of Apocalypse. Now, Iceman has a gruesome reality. Appearing in Old Man Logan issue 2 back in 2015, this Iceman encountered one of Apocalypse's horsemen, Sabretooth, in the Savage Land, and then was seemingly killed by another horseman, Holocaust, who erupted into atomic fire which engulfed the land and Robert. While his teammates were dead, it was revealed that poor Bobby Drake survived, having become a form of pure moisture, which would then evaporate and reconsolidate into a rainstorm that then poured over the X-Men as they fought Apocalypse. Talk about a jarring existence. He's also a much cruder looking version of the character than we're normally used to. And at 7, Ruins Kitty Pryde. Ruins is one of the most depressing series in the Marvel multiverse. It's tragic as hell, and most of our favorite characters have suffered from terrible fates in this timeline. Ruins takes place on Earth 9591, a place in which all mutants had horrible side effects with their powers. We actually mentioned the version of Professor X on our last part. He became the US president who would then hold mutants in a Texan prison, ordering for them to be experimented on and disfigured for their own good. Kitty Pryde is one of those mutants. She's imprisoned and, in an attempt to escape, uses her phasing powers, but that does not go as planned. Instead, when she's phasing, she gets stuck halfway through a door, causing her to lose 3 feet of her intestines in the process. We never see her die on panel, but it's assumed that, losing a whole 3 out of the 20 feet of intestines that one has inside their body surely wouldn't have the greatest of side effects. There's some science facts for you. We have 20 feet of intestines inside of our bodies. And at number 6, Wolverine. Wolverine is actually a character who appears on Earth 616. He comes to be after Wolverine's soul was dragged to hell and an unnamed demon decides to take over his body. His whole mission is to ruin everything Wolverine likes in his life, including people. Wolverine starts his crusade by going after a pastor that Wolverine had just met prior, covering the pastor's body with insects and stabbing him through the chest, then going over to his church, spraying acid all over it and burning it to the ground while the congregation was inside. Yeah, dark, huh? Luckily, he doesn't get very far when he encounters X-23, who manages to defeat him. Despite that, Wolverine goes after the X-Men and almost murders Colossus. He's captured by Mystique, and a ritual is performed to bring Wolverine's soul back to his body. Once Wolverine has returned, he and Wolverine duke it out inside of his body, and eventually Jean Grey is able to force the demon out and back to hell. And at 5, Ultimates Nightcrawler. The Ultimates universe, aka Earth 1610, is filled with a whole lot of fascinating but often meaner versions of beloved Marvel characters. Nightcrawler Kurt Wagner definitely falls into that category. Kurt grew up in the Bavarian mountains but was kidnapped for the Weapon X program in his early formative years. He was forced into becoming a mutant agent for them. Once free of the program, he joined up with the X-Men and was generally well liked until, well, he turned out to be a total dick. After he befriended Colossus, the metal mutant came out to him telling Kurt that he was gay. Turns out the Ultimates version of Kurt is a bit of a homophobe and was disgusted by Colossus, telling him that he was dead to him. He eventually grew very lonely and then kidnapped his crush, Dazzler, who at the time was dating Angel, all as a scheme to manipulate her to love him instead. The X-Men had to go after him to rescue Dazzler, and Xavier had to put Kurt into a coma in order to rehabilitate him. And at number 4, The Fallen from Earth 1298. We've got another alternate of Warren Worthington III on our list, this time from the Mutant X reality. Now on this Earth, Warren has a very different transformation into one of Apocalypse's horsemen. Rather than being Archangel, he became something referred to as the Fallen. No longer did he have his angelic wings. Instead, his skin became incredibly pale and his wings became bat-like, and he was able to breathe fire. Warren, thanks to this transformation, becomes completely conflicted, eventually giving in to all of his dark urges, turning against his allies and becoming completely cruel and merciless. It even got to the point that no one trusted him anymore, friend or foe. Moving on to number 3, Charles Xavier from Earth 20329. This Xavier comes from an Earth that's referred to as the steampunk god world, in which the world is ruled by mutant gods. Which seems pretty neat, until this Charles Xavier comes along and he's totally evil and then takes mental control over all of the mutant gods. Xavier wasn't satisfied with the gods who ruled over them, so he began to manipulate Storm. He made the gods slaughter millions of innocent people and cause natural disasters like droughts, which made the people of Earth rise up and fight against them, including the version of this Earth's Magneto named Magnus. Together, Xavier and Magnus created the secret island of Utopia, a haven of science and technology for mortals. At some point he reveals the truth, freeing the gods from his control, but later would be killed by Magnus because of it. And at number 2, Nazi X-Men. Here we have an Earth, Earth 597, in which the X-Men are Nazis, all thanks to the Nazis winning World War II. They subsequently took over the world. The X-Men here are called the Reichmen, and consist of Banshee, Storm, Havoc, Psylocke, and Rogue. It is an Earth that appears in Excalibur Weird War 3, Volume 1, Issue 1 from 1990, 1990, where the Nazi universe begins to slip into the 616 universe. The Excalibur team end up having to fight against them along with Herr Xavier, a German version of Professor X who resembles Joseph Mengele, one of the real-life Nazi scientists who was known for his cruel experiments on Jewish prisoners in Holocaust camps. Xavier creates mutants through horrible genetic experiments, including the Reichman, so fits the bill. And finally, in at number 1, Sublime Beast. This version of Hank McCoy comes from Earth 15104, and he's a drug addict, among other things. From the mind of Grant Morrison, this alternate reality is from the writer's Here Comes Tomorrow story arc, in which we get to see a glimpse of a future timeline version of the X-Men. It's a post-apocalyptic world in which Scott Summers has abandoned his role as the leader of the X-Men, leaving Hank to take over, who ends up creating an army of cloned night crawlers in order to take over the world. Hank's having some major trouble keeping things together, and he became incredibly stressed out, so he starts using a drug for mutants called Kick. Being vulnerable, he becomes the new host for Sublime and wages a war against humanity. That's where the Nightcrawler clones come in. They're called the Crawlers. And in the process, he ends up completely destroying the Xavier Institute. 150 years later, he's still at it, wanting to completely wipe out other species that were not mutants. He manages to find the Phoenix Egg and resurrects Jean Grey, aka Phoenix, who, seeing him as Beast rather than Sublime, acts as his minion, exterminating races in his name. He takes some of her DNA and duplicates her powers for himself, which then prompts Jean to remember who she is and purge Sublime from Hank's body. And at number 10, what if Professor X had become the Juggernaut? From What If issue 13 volume 2, here we have a story in which Charles Xavier becomes the Juggernaut. It's a simple answer to what would happen. Xavier ends up getting buried alive, but the consequences are much greater. Because of this, he's never able to create the X-Men, leaving the Fantastic Four responsible for taking on Magneto. It gets worse, snowballing into some major anti-mutant hysteria. Eventually Xavier manages to dig himself out of the ground, but it's too late for him to try to change the world for the better. He ends up using his super strength combined with his powerful psychic abilities to take over the US and enforce anti-human laws, using the X-Men to do so. In the process, he ends up defeating a lot of major Marvel characters, including the Fantastic Four, Spider-Man, Doctor Doom, Iron Man, Daredevil, and even the Hulk. Russia then tries to bomb the US, which is the catalyst for World War III. Xavier steps up, finding a way to make the Earth livable despite all the damage from the bomb, and ends up becoming the supreme leader of the planet. His only ask? That mutants aren't treated like crap. More mutants are born thanks to the bomb radiation, making up almost half of the planet's population. But despite the world finding some sort of peace, Xavier has gone mad, and in secret the remaining heroes and superpowered characters plot his demise, no longer believing in his dream since mutants now openly terrorize humans. This leads to a clash between Xavier and several of the X-Men on Asteroid M, with Quicksilver using explosives to launch Xavier into space, a potentially temporary solution that leaves Cyclops, Jean Grey, Scarlet Witch, and Quicksilver with the responsibility of trying to repair the world in the meantime. Talk about a hefty storyline. And at number 9, what if Wolverine had lived during the age of Conan the Barbarian? Conan the Barbarian has made many an appearance in What If comics over the years. In this story though, which appears in What If Volume 2 issue 16, Wolverine is transported to another time. Within the first few panels, he slays a T-Rex, impressing the locals. He finds himself completely immersing himself in the culture, getting a new outfit, and not understanding a damn word that anyone is saying. Eventually he crosses paths with Conan, a battle ensues, and Conan slits Wolverine's throat. Thinking he's killed him, he walks away, but little does he know that Wolverine has a mutant healing factor. He pursues him, more shenanigans ensue, and Wolverine ends up staying in Conan's world, with Conan being teleported back out to where the X-Men are battling on the moon. And he also ends up with Sonya, who looks just like Jean Grey apparently. Oh, redheads. And at number 8, What If? X-Men Wedding Album. Issue 60 from Volume 2 of the What If series explored a specific theme. It contains a slew of stories related to Cyclops and Jean Grey's relationship, exploring different facets and possibilities. There's What If Scott Summers and Jean Grey had married earlier, which sees the couple marrying earlier on during the beginnings of the mutant team. Another one is What If Scott Summers and Jean Grey had never fallen in love at all, which results in Cyclops leaving the X-Men team altogether. Then there's What If Phoenix had fallen for Wolverine, perhaps the most tragic tale of them all, which involves the X-Men disbanding, ultimately thanks to the fact that all of the characters die. The framing for the entire issue revolves around the mainstream Earth 616 continuity of Jean and Scott, particularly pertaining to X-Men Volume 2 issue 30, in which the two have their wedding. And at 7, What If Cable had destroyed the X-Men? This one comes from What If Volume 2 issue 46, which was released in 1993. Its narrative follows Charles Xavier returning to Earth after being on a hiatus, only to discover that his X-Men teams have all strayed significantly. He holds meetings with each of the teams only to get into a fight with Cable, in which a battle ensues. Some side with Xavier while others side with Cable, and Cable ends up fleeing. Later on, he assassinates Xavier along with Jean Grey and Scott Summers, killing them when they least expect it by launching a siren bomb at their dinner table. This causes a major disturbance between the members of all the X teams, dividing them, causing them to fight amongst themselves. In the meantime, the teams outside sight of the mutant-based ones are forced to pick up the slack. The Avengers and Fantastic Four are fighting off typical X-Men villains since the X-Men are too busy beating each other up instead. There's a massive fight and Wolverine's team of mutants clashes with Cable's team, killing Cable and his pals. Everything kind of falls apart there, with Magneto swooping in to try to get the remaining members of these battle-worn teams to join up with him. And talk about being an opportunist. Can you blame him though? And at 6, what if Wolverine was an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D? This one might be my personal favorite. From What If Volume 2 Issue 7, first released in 1989, here we have Wolverine, Agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. The timeline diverges from the 616 timeline after Wolverine encounters the Wendigo with the Hulk. After that battle, he goes on loan to S.H.I.E.L.D. for a single mission to help them retrieve a stolen LMD tech. Hydra, of course, is the culprit behind the theft. Nick Fury and Wolverine hunt down the LMD robots and destroy them, one of which includes a decoy of Dum Dum Dugan. Upset about this revelation, Fury sends Wolverine and Black Widow to hunt down any other LMDs possibly infiltrating S.H.I.E.L.D. Turns out half of the crew on board of their ship were robots. The trio then set out to hit Hydra's base and rescue the real Dum Dum, which has them crossing paths with Madame Hydra and Baron von Strucker, who is in possession of the Satan Claw. A brawl ensues, with S.H.I.E.L.D. being victorious. Fury then offers Wolverine a spot permanently on the team, and Logan, wanting a change of pace, agrees. It's around this time on 616 that he'd be joining up with the X-Men anyway. Logan rises in the ranks, becoming Fury's number 2, and later on, Fury is murdered by a Strucker LMD seeking revenge, who takes him out in his flying Ferrari nonetheless. Gotta love the 80s. At Fury's funeral, Dum Dum retires, which makes Logan the new director of S.H.I.E.L.D. This has a powerful domino effect on the world. Using S.H.I.E.L.D., Wolverine prevents several major events in the Marvel Universe, including the creation of Sentinels, Dark Phoenix's emergence, there's no Mutant Registration Act, and overall, it improves human and mutant relations for the better. Kind of hurts to see the potential Logan had at S.H.I.E.L.D., doesn't it? But on a different note, fun fact, another story in this issue is what if Aunt May was a mutant with claws? So I guess, that's one hell of a reminder that this is a what if issue. In at number 5, what if the X-Men had stayed in Asgard? Based on the comic New Mutants Special Edition issue 1, What If the X-Men Had Stayed in Asgard is a riff off of a story in which concluded with them leaving Asgard to return to Earth. The premise is very self-explanatory here. The X-Men all vote, and those who wish to leave are sent home by Loki. The rest of the story follows the lives of these remaining X-Men and how they assimilate into Asgardian culture. Rogue finds love, being able to touch the Asgardian people. Mirage becomes a Valkyrie. Storm becomes the goddess of thunder, and Loki attempts to trick her into slaying his brother, who has been transformed into a frog. Hela then attacks Asgard, and the X-Men alongside Thor, who's eventually transformed back to his normal self, fight her and her army. They defeat her and Thor returns to Earth, giving Storm the throne and Asgard to rule. And Loki? Well, for the tricks that he played in getting the X-Men to stay, he slowly goes mad by the end of the comic, thanks to the ones who sit above in shadow. Moving on to number 4, what if the new X-Men had died on their very first mission? Coming out of What If Volume 2 Issue 9, this comic book has a wonderful cover. It's Charles Xavier being pushed away from the X-Men's funeral by Beast, shouting out up into the heavens, "The X-Men are dead and I killed them!" The concept for this one places the original X-Men and the new X-Men being killed off on their mission, with Xavier telepathically feeling each and every one of their deaths. Beast, the only X-Men member to not have gone on this mission, tries to console the depressed Xavier. Count Nefaria sees how weakened the X-Men are and attacks, which forces Beast into forming a new ragtag team that consists of himself, Scarlet Witch, Quicksilver, Siren, Warpath, and Namorita, the female version of Namor. This new team end up fighting and defeating Count Nefaria, and Xavier, seeing this new team all put together, begins to come out of his depression, asking the new team to stay on and become official X-Men. All works out for the best. Except, all of the original ones are dead, but hey. Moving on to number 3, what if Wolverine had killed the Hulk? From What If Volume 1 Issue 13, we see a rehashing of Wolverine's first appearance in the comics, when he first crossed paths with the Hulk in the Incredible Hulk issue 181. Although he technically made a cameo in the issue prior, but cameo. It was like in a panel. Now in that story, Wolverine and the Hulk initially see each other as a threat before teaming up together to take down the Wendigo. But in this story though, Wolverine and the Hulk duke it out. And rather than being interrupted by the Wendigo, which initially causes them to stop fighting each other, the Wendigo never shows up. This ends up resulting in Wolverine fatally wounding the Hulk, and leads to him fleeing from authorities despite his attacks being out of self-defense. Because he's on the run, he doesn't join the X-Men. Instead, he teams up with Magneto and joins the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, with his first assignment being to infiltrate the X-Men. He does, but in the process grows close to the mutant team, and when the time comes for him to double-cross them, he just can't do it. Instead, he turns on Magneto, and Magneto and Wolverine fight, with them killing each other in the process. And at number 2, what if Wolverine was Lord of the Vampires? This one's great. Here's a what if story that should be familiar to some of you who frequent our channel. From What If Volume 2 Issue 24, what if Wolverine was Lord of the Vampires? Vampires tells the tale of Wolverine and the X-Men crossing paths with none other than Count Dracula. The two fight and Wolverine gets bitten, becoming a vampire himself. But thanks to his willpower, he's able to evade Dracula's mind control abilities and ends up fighting him for dominance. Wolverine succeeds and kills him, and then proceeds to transform all of the other X-Men into vampires, with him and his new army going around biting beloved heroes and draining them of their blood. Eventually, for some reason that I swear totally makes sense, Doctor Strange has taken over the body of the Punisher and goes after Wolverine, and manages to get through to Logan in the end, stopping his blood reign of terror. And finally, in at number 1, what if Phoenix had not died? From What If, issue 27, volume 1, we see the Watcher looking into an alternate reality in which Jean Grey did not die during the incursion with the Shi'ar. Rather, she was reborn, and when the X-Men find themselves facing off against Galactus and Terrax in the Shi'ar galaxy, the Phoenix rises and kicks some serious butt, stopping Galactus. But something is not right. Jean Grey is overwhelmed by the Phoenix Force and ends up losing control, destroying a star. Once back home on Earth at the X-Mansion, Kitty Pryde confronts Jean about the star that she destroyed. This does not bode well. Jean loses it and becomes Dark Phoenix, killing Kitty in response. The X-Men attempt to stop her, but her rampage continues. She ends up killing Polaris. Cyclops tries to intervene too, but Phoenix murders him as well. And it only gets worse from there. Jean entirely loses control and the Phoenix Force engulfs the entire world, destroying it, with it continuing to expand in the universe, consuming it all bit by bit. Talk about depressing.
Number 10. Dirty Bomb Wolverine. Why does this sound like some sort of sexy nickname for Wolverine? It really is not. Instead, this alternate version of Wolverine is an empty clone that was created in the current Wolverine series and used to basically burn vampires loyal to Dracula from the inside out. This all went down in a battle in the effort of freeing Omega Red from Dracula's hold over him, while also getting back at Drac, who was attempting to get his hands on Wolverine so he could use his blood to allow his own vampire army to walk around during the day, making them obviously much more powerful. Omega Red's plan to stop Dracula was to give him what he wanted, which meant making a clone of Wolverine who was gene edited to have blood that was thick with photonic cells, similar to the ones found in plankton, which produce their own luminescence. Basically, the blood of the Dirty Bomb clone Wolverine then had the opposite effect on the vamps who consumed it, meaning they would be burnt from the inside out as opposed to being able to walk in the day. Having a gene-edited clone of Wolverine is a frightening prospect, and a clone who is used simply as a decoy and bomb is pretty morally scary. And then there is the added factor of how it made the vampires feel to learn of it. And I'm sure that they were properly terrified before they were all killed. Minus Dracula, of course, who got away in the end, like he always does. Although the mutants won the battle in issue number 12 of the current Wolverine series, they did not win the war. Still continues with the Vampire Nation. Number 9. Darkclaw. If you find the Batman scary, and I mean, who doesn't? He is often drawn with the intention of looking intimidating and scary enough to strike fear into the hearts of goons and villains all across Gotham. Then take a seat, because Darkclaw is definitely going to spook you a bit here. Darkclaw comes to us from the Amalgam universe, where he was created as a cross between Marvel's Wolverine and DC's Batman, blending together two of the Big Two's most popular and frightening heroic characters. He's got the backstory and fortune of Batman, but still boasts of the adamantium-coated skeleton and healing factor of Wolverine, meaning that Logan Wayne is not an alternate version that you would want to mess with. And all my ghouls out there, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more Wolverine lists, be sure to let us know by clicking that like button and commenting down below. Also, if you click like and if you smash subscribe, you can call me Vampy. Number 8. Phoenix. One of the most terrifying versions of Wolverine in terms of what he could be capable of has to be the Wolverine from the alternate future, where Thor ends up as Allfather and Loki wipes out all of humanity, just to make his brother suffer, of course. In this dystopian future, Wolverine himself ends up being chosen to become the new host for the Phoenix Force after his own death. Phoenix Logan was obviously capable of many different insane feats due to him being imbued with, well, the Phoenix Force, even managing to save Loki from the Celestials. Pretty impressive. However, Phoenix Wolverine would prove to be not quite as scary when facing a future version of Doom, who obliterated him. But Logan, being imbued with the power of the Phoenix Force, meant that he could resurrect, and in order to ensure that Doom would be defeated this time around, he sacrificed himself to empower Allfather Thor's weapon Mjolnir in the continued battle. Also, that would be the one really powerful Mjolnir. It's like Mjolnir with the Phoenix Force. That's crazy. Number 7. Akahiro. Sure, Sure, Daken is a character all his own, but I also counted a clone that was used as a dirty bomb against vampires, so I feel like if I do that, it would be really insulting if we did not talk about Akihiro. Daken was an alternate version of Wolverine during Dark Reign, where Norman Osborn basically took over in the comics, where he forged the organization Hammer and his very own Dark Avengers. The Dark Avengers were made up of former and current villains repurposed and remarketed as Avengers replacements. Osborn actually tried to recruit some of the original Avengers after they'd been disbanded, but of course they pretty much all refused. They were like, we know you're Norman Osborn, so. Daken was recruited to be Dark Wolverine on the team, and while Akihiro might not be quite as villainous in the comics currently, at the time he was still pretty much one of the baddies. Daken is a terrifying alternate because he has less of a moral code than his dad, who already isn't known for his light touch when it comes to dealing with his opponents. Daken, like his father, is also a skilled fighter and assassin who was trained since he was a child to become a killer and a weapon for Romulus to use against Logan. Oh, and if you're not familiar with him, he also has pretty much all the powers of his dad. His claws are just a little bit different. Actually, Daken also has pheromone powers, so he's not really more powerful than his dad in terms of skill, but power set, just saying. Number 6. Wolverine Noir. Jim Logan is one of the noir versions of Wolverine that we see in the Marvel Noirverse. Another shows up in the X-Men Noir series, but with a different backstory and also kind of a different name. He's a bootlegger, but the one we're focusing on here is a detective. Honestly, a lot of the noir versions of heroes are detectives. But back then in the stories, everyone was a detective, so I'm fine with it. Either way, I personally think that narrative fits Wolverine's power set just a little bit better, being a skilled tracker himself. Jim in Wolverine Noir is part of Logan and Logan, a detective agency that boasts that they're the best there is at what we do. The whole look of the series is very creepy, very noir, and it also draws a lot on the backstory of Wolverine given to us in his origin series, where we learn of how he was mistreated as a boy, his relation to Dog, and his childhood love and friend Rose. In this version of the story, Logan's father is a very religious preacher who often forces young Jim to sit and listen to his sermons while he rehearses them. Number 5. Old Man Logan. Definitely one of the scariest alternate versions of Wolverine out there when it comes to the reality in which he resides. Old Man Logan hails from the alternate reality of Earth 807128. In this reality, it was Wolverine himself who was responsible for the death of the X-Men, as he was tricked by Mysterio into slaughtering all of them when the villains took over and ended up finally winning the day. Flash forward to the future, where Wolverine is old and he doesn't go by that codename anymore because, well, it brings back pretty painful memories, which he still is haunted by to this day. Instead, he's simply known as Logan. But even though he tries to stay away from heroics, retiring, and even settling down with a wife and kids, he can't seem to escape his vigilante ways. After his family are killed when he is late to pay forced protection money to the Hulk gang, Logan himself seeks revenge, inevitably and gruesomely freeing pretty much everyone from the villainous nature of deranged Pappy Banner and his inbred family. That Hulk gang. Oh boy. Number 4. CANCERVERSE Wolverine. We don't know that much about CANCERVERSE Wolverine, who hails from the Earth of 10011, but we do know, like many others who hail from this reality, Wolverine here is horrifying to behold, and he is part of the X-Men, spelt E-X-Men. In the CANCERVERSE, death was completely eradicated, which you might think would bring about a sort of paradise in the cosmos, but instead this change had, well, the opposite effect, mutating everything into one big horror show. Turns out death wasn't quite as bad as we all thought, and that life, left unchecked, is actually horrifying. Who would have guessed? Number 3. X-24. In the film Logan, X-24 was an even more deadly clone than X-23. This was a clone version of Wolverine genetically engineered to be as powerful as Wolverine in his prime, perhaps even more so, and who was much more easy to control and manipulate. Not as free thinking and just more of a straight up berserker. So basically like Wolverine without any of his moral code at all, or any inhibitions. This made X-24 the perfect weapon to be used against Wolverine himself and escapee Laura, aka X-23. It took a lot to take down X-24, and his perceived strength and ruthlessness in the film made him a terrifying nemesis to watch. I don't know about you, but I got so anxious every time he showed up on screen in that initial watch through of Logan. Even when I rewatch it now, I'm like, Logan, no, X-24's coming for you, run! Number 2. Lord of the Vampires. This alternate version of Wolverine comes to us from the What If series Volume 2 2, issue 24. Here, the fate of the world was forever changed when, during the X-Men's battle with Dracula, Storm ultimately decided to remain with Dracula. This changed the course of history forever, as Wolverine and the other heroes were captured and transformed into vampires themselves. However, Wolverine's willpower proved much too strong for Dracula to tame or control, and so he was challenged and later defeated by Wolverine, who then became the new Lord of the Vampires. What's scarier than a Terminator-style clone version of Wolverine? How about a vampire version of Wolverine who rules over all of the other vampires and can turn anyone into his loyal thrall? Number 1. Zombieverse Wolverine. Actually, I feel a little bad that I put the zombies above the vampires in this list, but here we are. I don't know how, but I almost actually forgot to mention Zombieverse Wolverine on this list. I guess maybe it's just because I'm so fixated on vampires, which I guess makes sense. But it's really shocking considering how emotionally scarring and overall how terrifying I find the Zombieverse in Marvel to be. It's just a real horror show over there. Over on Earth Z or Earth 2149, Wolverine isn't just any old zombie either, but becomes one of the zombie cosmic or zombie galacti, after he and a group of chosen few fight over and successfully devour Galactus's remains. For a long time, this granted zombie Wolverine the power cosmic, so not only was he now a terrifying member of the undead with Wolverine's killer instincts and fighting prowess, but then he also had the power cosmic on top of that. Wow.